Captain Lucas had always believed that being a soldier was about honor, duty, and the occasional reward for a job well done. But nothing could have prepared him for the reward he was about to receive. The war had been long and brutal. For years, Lucas and his squad fought to protect human colonies across the galaxy. After one final, perilous mission that saved an entire colony from a fierce alien invasion, Lucas found himself summoned to the High Command. He stood tall in his uniform, his chest filled with pride from the victory. But when he entered the Grand Hall, the recognition he had expected wasn't waiting for him. Instead of a medal or promotion, Lucas was led to a small, dimly lit room at the back of the building. A figure stood silently near the center. A woman, standing perfectly still. She was tall, with striking features, her skin a pale shade of blue-green, almost translucent under the harsh light. She wore a simple outfit, but her posture was one of submission. Her hands bound together by glowing chains that hummed softly. Lucas's confusion grew as an officer stepped forward. "Captain Lucas," the officer began, "we present to you your reward for your efforts in saving the colony." Lucas's gaze shifted between the officer and the woman, unable to comprehend what was happening. "I don't understand. What is this?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "This is Zara," the officer explained, gesturing to the woman. "She is from Zethros, a conquered planet. As per our custom, victorious soldiers are rewarded with one of their people as a servant. She is now your responsibility." Zara's head remained lowered, her eyes refusing to meet Lucas's gaze. Her shackles rattled as she shifted slightly, a silent reminder of her status as a slave. Lucas felt a knot form in his stomach. He had expected a simple medal or a new weapon, not an alien woman in chains. "Wait, she's a slave?" Lucas asked, his voice quieter now, but filled with hesitation. "You can't be serious. This is wrong." The officer's expression didn't change. "She is the spoils of war, Captain. You saved the colony, and this is your reward. You may do with her as you wish." Lucas stepped back, his mind racing. He had fought for freedom, for peace, for humanity's survival. And now, in the name of victory, he was being given a woman as a prize. He could feel the weight of her gaze, even though she didn't meet his eyes, and the weight of the chains on her wrists seemed to press down on his conscience. Zara was quiet, her face betraying no emotion. The officer's words echoed in Lucas's mind, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was deeply wrong. How could he accept this? How could he look at Zara, a person with her own story, her own life, and see her as property? As the officer spoke of Zara's background, how she was captured during the fall of Zethros and brought to serve the Empire, Lucas felt his discomfort grow. This wasn't a reward. It was an injustice, one that he couldn't just ignore. I don't want her," Lucas said finally, his voice firm. "This isn't what I fought for. I didn't fight for someone to be enslaved, not even as a prize." The officer's expression hardened. "You have no choice, Captain. The reward is already granted. Your duty is to accept it." Lucas's mind churned. He couldn't accept Zara as his prize, but what could he do? He was one soldier, and the weight of the Empire's power was too great. His own discomfort felt small against the crushing reality of what was happening. Zara had been taken from her home, her people, and now she was expected to serve him. "Take her," the officer said, curtly, his voice a final command. For a moment, Lucas stood there, frozen, before he took a step forward. Zara's eyes finally met his, but they weren't filled with gratitude or hope. They were filled with something darker, the pain of someone who had been broken by the weight of captivity. "Follow me," Lucas said softly, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to Zara or to himself. As they walked out of the High Command's hall, Lucas tried to make sense of everything. What did this mean for him? For her? He was a soldier, trained to follow orders. But this was a line he wasn't sure he could cross. This was no longer about fighting enemies. It was about something far more personal. The ride back to the ship was quiet. Zara sat beside him, her hands still bound, her eyes staring out the window. She didn't speak. She didn't look at him. But Lucas couldn't stop thinking about the sadness in her eyes, the weight of her history, and the burden of the chains she wore. As the ship ascended into the vastness of space, Lucas realized that he had no idea what to do next. He had been given a slave, but he couldn't treat her as one. He couldn't pretend that she was simply an object or a prize. In his mind, Lucas had saved the colony, but now he wondered if he had saved anything at all. The days aboard the ship were filled with silence, a silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Captain Lucas could feel it growing between him and Zara as they traveled through the vast emptiness of space. He tried to focus on his duties, but every time he glanced at her, something tugged at his conscience. She sat in the corner of the small room they shared, her back straight and her gaze never meeting his. She was an enigma, a woman bound by chains and forced into a life she had never chosen. But beyond that, there was something in her eyes, something that Lucas couldn't ignore. Zara had barely spoken since their departure from the high command. She kept her distance, her body language closed off, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Lucas respected her silence, not sure what to say. She had been given to him as a reward, but how could he accept it? How could he look at her and treat her as anything less than a prisoner of war, someone who had suffered greatly at the hands of the Empire? His gaze kept drifting back to her, and he couldn't help but notice the way her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, the sharp angles of her face, the strength in her posture. Despite the chains, despite the circumstances, there was a quiet power in her presence. She was not like the other prisoners he had encountered in his time as a soldier. She was different, more than just an alien subject to be controlled. Zara caught him staring once, her eyes flashing briefly, but she quickly looked away. It was the first time he had seen her show any emotion, and it unsettled him. She was angry, and who could blame her? He was the one who had been handed a woman who had no say in her fate. She was bound, her life and freedom taken from her, and Lucas had been the one to inherit her, not as a person, but as a possession. "Do you ever talk?" Lucas asked one day, his voice soft, almost tentative. Zara's eyes met his for the briefest moment. "Why would I?" she replied, her voice cool and distant. "I am nothing here, just a thing, a prize for your victory." Her words stung, and Lucas was silent for a long moment, unsure of how to respond. He couldn't deny the truth in what she said. He had been given a slave, a woman forced into servitude, and now he was expected to treat her as though she were nothing more than an object. "I don't think of you that way," Lucas said finally, his voice firm but soft. He didn't know why he had said it, but the words felt right. He didn't see Zara as a thing. He didn't want to. Zara didn't answer, her gaze returning to the stars outside the window. There was a strange tension in the air, a sense of something unsaid, but neither of them knew how to break it. It seemed easier to avoid the subject altogether. The days passed slowly. Lucas went about his usual duties, but he couldn't stop thinking about Zara. He'd seen the way she moved, the way she held herself even in the face of her captivity. There was a fire in her, a strength that couldn't be easily broken. It made him wonder what had happened to her, what her life had been like before she had become a prisoner. At night, when the ship was quiet, Lucas would find himself lying, awake, his thoughts turning to Zara and what he could do for her. She deserved better than this, better than being treated as property. But what could he do? He was just one man in a vast empire, bound by the same rules that had led to her capture. The idea of freeing her seemed impossible, even dangerous. But the thought of leaving her as she was, silent, angry, and distant, was something he couldn't accept. One evening, after a long day of travel, Lucas found himself sitting across from Zara. They were alone in the small room, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound between them. "Zara," he began, his voice hesitant, "I don't know how to help you, but I won't treat you like this. I can't." She didn't look at him, but her fingers twitched slightly as if considering his words. For a moment, Lucas thought she might speak, but instead she remained silent. "I'm not your enemy," he said quietly, his words heavy with meaning. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to be here, and I'm sorry for what's happened to you. But I won't treat you like a slave. I won't." Zara finally looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And what do you want from me, Captain? What do you want me to say? That I'm grateful? That I should thank you for being kind to me?" Her voice was sharp, the bitterness in her words unmistakable. "I don't need your pity." Lucas flinched at the force of her words. "I'm not pitying you, He struggled to find the right words. "I just think you deserve more than this. You deserve your freedom." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Freedom? You think I don't want that? You think I don't wish every day that I could escape, that I could go back to my people?" She stood up suddenly, her eyes flashing with anger. "But I can't. I'm trapped. We all are. I've been trapped my entire life." Lucas stood as well, unsure of what to do. "I didn't mean to make things worse," he said, his voice low. "I just want to help." Zara's gaze softened just a little. She stepped toward him, her chains dragging on the floor, but she didn't flinch when she spoke. "You want to help? Then stop treating me like a thing. Stop pretending that you can fix what was broken long before you came into my life." Lucas nodded slowly, understanding her pain in a way he hadn't before. It wasn't just the chains that held her. It was the years of war, the years of being treated as less than human, less than anything. And no matter how kind he tried to be, no matter how much he wanted to change things, he couldn't undo the past. Zara turned away, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "You can't fix me, Captain. No one can." Lucas watched her walk to the far side of the room, her shoulders slumped, the weight of her past hanging heavily on her. He knew that he couldn't fix everything, but maybe, just maybe, he could start by understanding her. As the days passed, the tension between Lucas and Zara began to shift. It wasn't a sudden change, but it was undeniable. There were moments when their conversations felt less like an obligation and more like a genuine exchange. Lucas began to see Zara not just as the alien woman he had been given, but as a person, someone with her own history and emotions. And slowly, Zara started to let her guard down, even if only a little. One evening, after another long day of travel through the vast emptiness of space, they found themselves in the small, quiet room once again. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant background noise, but in that silence, something different hung between them. Zara was sitting by the window, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. For the first time since he had met her, Lucas didn't see the distance in her eyes. There was a softness there, something almost vulnerable. It caught him off guard. "You know, I used to look at the stars with hope," Zara said, her voice soft but steady. "Before all of this happened, before the war came, before they enslaved my people." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Lucas hesitated, unsure of how to respond. But something inside him told him to keep the conversation going. "What was it like?" he asked quietly. "Before all of this?" Zara didn't answer right away. She sat still, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of her chains. The silence stretched on, but Lucas didn't press her. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, almost to herself. "We were free," she said. "We were strong. My people, the Zethrosians, we had a home, a beautiful world. The stars felt like they were ours, and we believed we could control our fate." There was a sadness in her words, a longing for a past that could never return. Lucas felt a pang of sympathy, but he didn't know what to say. Instead, he just listened, allowing Zara to speak when she was ready. But all of that changed. Zara continued, her gaze never leaving the stars. "The Empire came, and they destroyed everything. Our world, our culture, our freedom, it was all taken. I was forced into this life, this prison." She looked down at the chains that still bound her wrists, a bitter expression crossing her face. Lucas felt a knot in his stomach. He had heard of the Empire's cruelty, but hearing it from Zara, seeing the pain in her eyes, made it real in a way he hadn't fully understood before. "I'm sorry," Lucas said, his voice sincere. He didn't know what else to say. He couldn't undo what had been done to her, but he felt the need to acknowledge her suffering. Zara turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his for the first time in days. The anger that had once been there had faded, replaced by something softer, something Lucas couldn't quite place. "You didn't do this," she said quietly. "You're not the enemy. But it doesn't matter. What's done is done." She stood up, her chains rattling with the movement, but this time she didn't seem angry. She seemed tired, worn down by the years of struggle. Lucas stood as well, though he didn't move closer to her. He didn't want to crowd her space. "Maybe not," he said slowly, "but I don't want to leave you like this. I can't change the past, but I want to do something to make things better." Zara didn't answer immediately. She turned away, her gaze drifting back to the stars. The soft light from the window reflected in her eyes, making them seem almost otherworldly. It was the first time Lucas had seen her like this, vulnerable, not just physically, but emotionally. She wasn't the angry, distant figure she had been when they first met. She was still strong, still proud, but there was a depth to her that Lucas hadn't fully realized before. "I don't need your pity," she said after a long pause, her voice steady but lacking the bite it once had. "I don't need anything from you." Lucas nodded, understanding the truth in her words. "I'm not offering pity. I just—" He struggled to find the right words. "I want to help, even if I don't know how." Zara looked at him then, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Lucas thought she might say something harsh, but instead, she simply nodded. "You can't fix me, Captain. You can't fix what's been broken." "I know," Lucas replied quietly. "But I can try. I can treat you with respect, not as a prize or a possession. I can give you the space you need. I won't make you feel like you're less than human." Zara's eyes softened at that, and for the first time she seemed to relax. The tension between them began to ease, as if the words they had shared had bridged the gap that had once seemed so impossible to cross. The next few days were different. There was still a quietness between them, but it was no longer the heavy silence of discomfort. It was more like an understanding, an unspoken agreement that they would get through this together, not as captor and captive, but as two people trying to navigate the strange, difficult path that lay ahead. Lucas started to ask Zara about her home, about Zethros, and though she was still cautious, she began to answer. She spoke about her world with a fondness that surprised him, describing the landscapes, the culture, and the people she had once known. It was clear that her memories were a bittersweet escape from the reality she now lived in. For the first time since their journey began, Lucas realized that Zara wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was a survivor. And that made all the difference. Though the future was uncertain and the road ahead would be long and difficult, Lucas knew one thing for sure. The bond between them was no longer just one of necessity. It was the beginning of something real, something built on mutual understanding and, perhaps, trust. As the ship continued its course through the stars, the unspoken bond between them grew. They weren't the same as they had been when they first met. They had both changed in ways they didn't fully understand yet, but it was a change that felt right, and for the first time since accepting Zara as his reward, Lucas felt a sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to change things together. The days turned into weeks, and the silence between Lucas and Zara continued to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding. But as they moved deeper into the galaxy, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Empire had always been ruthless, but he hadn't fully realized just how far its control extended. The more he learned about Zara's people, the more he understood how much they had lost. And now, as the ship sailed deeper into enemy territory, the shadows of the Empire seemed to loom larger. It was during one of their conversations that Zara mentioned a rumor, whispers of a rebellion, a group of people fighting back against the Empire's tyranny. At first, Lucas didn't believe it. The Empire was too powerful, too well organized. How could a rebellion stand a chance? But Zara was insistent. The Zethrosians aren't the only ones who've been enslaved, she explained. There are others, and they're fighting back. They're waiting for the right time to strike. Lucas listened closely. The more Zara spoke, the more he realized that there was more at stake than just the political battle between the Empire and the colonies. This was about freedom, about people fighting for their lives, their homes, and their dignity. Zara's people had been crushed by the Empire, but others were still fighting, and they had been waiting for someone to lead them. What do you mean, the right time? Lucas asked, his curiosity growing. They're waiting for an opportunity, Zara replied, her voice growing more passionate. A weakness in the Empire's control. If they strike too early, they'll be crushed. But if they wait for the right moment, they might stand a chance. Lucas thought about it for a moment. He knew what it meant to fight against a seemingly unstoppable force. He had seen it in countless battles, the overwhelming power of the Empire, and the endless struggle of soldiers like himself. But he had never thought about the people behind the battle, the civilians, the families, the rebels. He had always been focused on his mission, on the orders he had been given. But now, hearing Zara speak, he felt something shift inside him. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not anymore. So, what can we do? Lucas asked. How can we help them? Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time there was a spark of hope in her expression. You're not just any soldier, Captain. You're a hero. You've already proven yourself by saving that colony. You've seen what the Empire is capable of. You've seen what they've done to my people. Maybe, just maybe, you can help lead the charge. Lucas frowned. Lead? I'm no leader. Zara's voice softened. You don't have to be. But you do have something that they need. A human soldier who has experience fighting the Empire. You've seen their weaknesses. You know how they operate. Lucas thought about it for a moment. It was true. He had seen the Empire's strengths and weaknesses up close. He had fought in battles, had led squads, had faced death more times than he cared to count. But this was different. This wasn't a mission. This wasn't just about strategy or tactics. This was about something deeper. Why me? He asked quietly. Because you understand what it's like to be the underdog, Zara said. You've fought against impossible odds before, and you know how to win. Lucas didn't know if he was ready for this kind of responsibility. But he couldn't ignore the fire in Zara's eyes, the passion that had begun to grow in her since they had started talking about the rebellion. He couldn't ignore the way she had changed. From a woman bound by chains to someone who was starting to believe in a better future. "I'm not the hero you think I am," Lucas said, his voice uncertain. "But if you think we can make a difference, I'll help. I'll do whatever I can." Zara nodded, the smallest hint of a smile on her lips. "That's all we need. Together we can fight back." The next day, Lucas and Zara made their way to a nearby planet where they were told the rebellion had a base. They landed under the cover of darkness, the ship blending in with the shadows of the planet's rocky terrain. Zara had told Lucas about a network of rebels who were gathering strength, waiting for the right moment to strike at the Empire. It was dangerous, Lucas knew that. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was the only way to make a real difference. They made contact with the rebel leader, a tall, quiet man named Kale. He was everything Lucas expected from a rebel leader, sharp-eyed, intense, and filled with quiet determination. At first, Kale had been skeptical about a human soldier joining the cause, but after hearing about Lucas's past and his role in saving the colony, Kale seemed to change his mind. He recognized that Lucas had the experience they needed. "This isn't just about fighting," Kale explained. "It's about surviving. It's about staying alive long enough to strike back." Lucas nodded. He understood that. He had seen how the Empire crushed any resistance that got in its way. But he also knew that resistance could take many forms, not just battles, but subversion, sabotage, and gaining the support of the people. As they spent the next few days in the rebel camp, Lucas began to see the bigger picture. The Empire's power was vast, but it was also fragile. They ruled through fear, through control, but they didn't understand the strength of the people they had subjugated. The rebels were fighting for freedom, for their lives, and for the future, and Lucas could help them. But the stakes were high. The rebellion wasn't just about attacking the Empire, it was about making a stand, about showing the galaxy that they wouldn't be intimidated anymore. It was about showing Zara's people and every other oppressed species that they had a chance at freedom. Lucas and Zara spent more time with the rebels, learning their strategies and preparing for the upcoming strike. They knew the risks, but they also knew that it was time to fight back. The Empire would not win this war if they could help it. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a part of a movement, a force for change. And, with Zara by his side, he felt like he had a chance to make a difference. The days that followed their meeting with the rebels were tense. As the plans for the rebellion's first major strike against the Empire took shape, Lucas could feel the weight of what they were about to do. The stakes were high. Failure meant certain death, not just for him and Zara, but for the entire rebellion. And yet, as much as the danger loomed over them, something within Lucas felt a flicker of hope. He had spent years fighting the Empire, following orders, never questioning the bigger picture. But now, standing side by side with the rebels, with Zara, he saw a new path. This wasn't about just following orders anymore. It was about making a stand for what was right. And Zara, despite the chains that still held her, was a part of that fight, no longer just a victim of her circumstances, but a powerful symbol of resistance. Lucas and Zara spent every waking hour preparing. The rebels had learned to live in the shadows, staying one step ahead of the Empire's forces. They were outnumbered, underfunded, and outgunned, but they had something the Empire didn't: the will to fight, the desire for freedom. One afternoon, as Lucas and Zara were walking through the rebel camp, Zara spoke up, her voice quiet but full of determination. "Do you think we can win?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Lucas paused for a moment, considering her question. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know we can't stop trying. We have to fight for something better." Zara nodded, her expression serious. "The Empire has taken everything from me, my home, my people, my freedom. But we still have A chance to take it all back. Lucas looked at her then, really looked at her. She was no longer just the woman he had been given as a reward. She was a fighter, a leader in her own right. Over the course of their journey, something had changed between them. They were no longer just a soldier and his captive. They had become allies, partners, united in a common cause. As the time for the first strike approached, Lucas found himself in constant discussions with Kale, the rebel leader. The plan was dangerous, but it was their best shot at crippling the Empire's hold on this part of the galaxy. They were going to target a critical supply depot, one that provided weapons and resources to the Empire's forces. If they could destroy it, they could delay the Empire's advance and give the rebellion time to gather strength. Lucas knew the risks. There would be no going back once they launched the attack. But he also knew that they couldn't afford to hesitate. The people who had suffered under the Empire's rule for so long deserved a chance at freedom. Zara, too, was ready. She had spent years in captivity, years dreaming of the day she could fight back. And now that the time had come, she was more determined than ever. She knew that this strike, no matter how dangerous, could change everything for her people. It could be the first step toward freedom. The night before the attack, Lucas found himself lying awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with thoughts of the mission, of the risks, of Zara. She had become so much more than a symbol of loss to him. She had become a symbol of strength, of resilience. He couldn't imagine facing the future without her by his side. The hour of the attack drew near. The rebel camp prepared. Soldiers gathered their gear, weapons were checked, and the final details of the plan were laid out. Lucas and Zara stood at the edge of the camp, watching the preparations. "I never thought it would come to this," Lucas said quietly, his voice filled with uncertainty. Zara turned to him, her eyes steady. "None of us did. But sometimes, the only way forward is through the fight. We have no choice now but to stand and fight." They exchanged a look, one that spoke volumes. They were no longer just two individuals caught in the web of a larger conflict. They were part of something bigger now, a movement that could change the course of history. The attack began at dawn. The rebels moved quickly, using the cover of darkness to reach the supply depot. Lucas led the charge, with Zara by his side, her movements graceful and deadly. She had learned to fight, to survive over the years. Now she was more than capable of holding her own. As they neared the depot, the tension in the air was palpable. The Empire's forces were strong, but they were caught off guard by the rebellion's speed and stealth. The first few moments of the battle were chaos, as explosions rocked the ground, sending shock waves through the depot. The rebels had the element of surprise, and they used it to their advantage. Lucas fought alongside Zara, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air, but through it all, he remained focused. He had been in many battles before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about winning. This was about taking a stand for something greater than themselves. Zara moved with precision, her eyes scanning the area for targets. She was fierce, her every movement showing the strength and power she had within her. Lucas couldn't help but watch her as she fought, her determination infectious. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been oppressed by the Empire, for everyone who had ever been made to feel powerless. The battle raged on, but the tide was turning in the rebels' favor. The supply depot was in flames, and the Empire's forces were scrambling to regroup. But the rebels didn't stop. They pressed forward, determined to make the most of their victory. When the dust settled, the depot lay in ruins. The rebels had won, this battle at least. But the cost of victory was high. Several rebels had fallen, and the Empire's retaliation would be swift. They had made their mark, but it was only the beginning. Lucas and Zara stood together, looking out at the aftermath of the battle. The flames from the burning depot cast an eerie glow on their faces. We did it, Zara said, her voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. We did, Lucas replied, his voice quiet but strong. But this is just the beginning. Zara nodded. The Empire won't stop coming, but neither will we. They knew that this victory was only the first step in a long and dangerous journey. The road ahead would be filled with more battles, more sacrifices, and more risks. But for the first time, Lucas felt that they had a chance. They had struck a blow against the Empire, and the rebellion had gained a foothold. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As they walked away from the battlefield side by side, Lucas realized that no matter what happened next, he wasn't alone. He had Zara, and together they would fight for the freedom they both deserved. The aftermath of the battle was both a victory and a reminder of the long road ahead. The flames of the destroyed supply depot still smoldered, sending dark plumes of smoke into the sky. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and debris. Lucas stood beside Zara, his heart heavy with the realization that this was just the beginning. The Empire would retaliate, but the rebellion had shown that they could strike back. The rebels celebrated their victory, but Lucas could see the exhaustion in their eyes. This wasn't a war that could be won in a day. It would take time, effort, and more sacrifices. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. And that hope had come from Zara, the woman who had once been a captive, now fighting beside him as an equal. Is it always like this? Lucas asked quietly, looking out over the wreckage. The cost of freedom? Zara stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. It's never easy, she said softly. But it's worth it. We've lost so much, but we can still fight for what's left. Lucas nodded. He understood now, in a way he hadn't before. The price of freedom wasn't just measured in battles won or lost. It was measured in the people who had given everything to make a difference. The rebels, the fighters, the survivors. Zara had taught him that, showing him what it meant to stand up even when everything seemed lost. The next few days were filled with preparations. The rebels needed to regroup, tend to their wounded, and plan their next steps. Lucas and Zara spent their time with the other leaders, discussing tactics and strategy. They knew that the Empire would not let this attack go unanswered. They needed to be ready for whatever came next. Lucas found himself thinking more about Zara's words. The rebellion was about more than just defeating the Empire. It was about giving people a chance to live free, without the fear of oppression hanging over them. And that was a cause worth fighting for. One evening, as the stars above them glistened in the vast, endless sky, Zara turned to Lucas. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I never imagined I'd be standing here free from my chains, fighting for something greater than myself." Lucas smiled slightly. "I never imagined I'd be here either," he said. "But I'm glad I am." Zara looked at him, her expression softening. "You're not just a soldier anymore, Lucas. You've become part of something bigger. You've helped give my people a chance, a future." Lucas felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He had always thought of himself as a soldier, following orders without question. But now he realized that he had become something more. He was a part of the rebellion, a part of something that could change the galaxy. "We've all become something more," Lucas replied. "We're all fighting for the same thing, a chance to live freely, without fear, without oppression." Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no anger, no bitterness. There was only understanding. She wasn't just the alien woman who had been given to him as a reward. She was his equal, his partner. "You're right," Zara said softly. "Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can change everything." The days passed quickly as the rebellion prepared for the next phase of their plan. They had learned to operate in the shadows, striking when the Empire least expected it. But Lucas knew that this fight wasn't just about strategy. It was about inspiring the people to rise up, to take their freedom back. One day, as Lucas was discussing the next mission with Kyle, the rebel leader, Zara approached them, her face set with determination. "There's something I need to do," she said, her voice firm. Kale turned to her. "What is it?" "I need to go back to Zethros," Zara said, her eyes flashing with resolve. "I need to find my people, to unite them. They need to know they're not alone. They need to see that they have a chance." Lucas's heart skipped a beat at her words. Zethros was a dangerous place. The Empire had taken everything from her people, and the risk of returning there was enormous. But he understood why she needed to go. She needed to reclaim her home, to rally her people to the cause. And she needed to do it herself. "You can't go alone," Lucas said, his voice steady. "I'll go with you." Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and appreciation. "You'd risk your life to help me?" Lucas nodded. "You've already risked everything for me, for all of us. I owe you that much." Zara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We'll do it together then. Zethros needs to see that we're not giving up, that no one is." The two of them set off for Zethros, leaving the rebel base behind. As they traveled through the galaxy, Lucas couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose he had never felt before. This wasn't just about fighting the Empire. This was about giving people hope. It was about showing them that they could stand up, that they could reclaim their freedom. When they arrived on Zethros, the planet was a shadow of its former self. The once beautiful landscapes were now scarred by the Empire's occupation. The cities were in ruins, and the people lived in fear, their spirits broken by years of oppression. But Zara's presence brought a spark of hope. She was a living testament to the fact that the Empire could be defeated, that freedom could be reclaimed. As they spoke to the people of Zethros, Lucas saw the change in their eyes. They had been waiting for someone to lead them, someone who could show them that they weren't alone. And Zara, with Lucas by her side, was that leader. "We can rebuild," Zara said to the gathered crowd. "We can fight back. And together, we will take our planet back from the Empire." Lucas watched as the people of Zethros began to rally around her. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But for the first time, there was a real chance for change. Zara turned to Lucas, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "You've helped me find my people. But more than that, you've given me a reason to believe again." Lucas smiled. "We've given each other a reason to believe." Together, they stood in the midst of the rebellion, knowing that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But, for the first time, they had a future to fight for, a future where freedom was possible, and that, they knew, was only the beginning.